you and just kind of check in, see how things are going. We are here for our healthy fats pillar, so this is week 3. We're going to do some cooking demos as before, so we're going to do basically some no oil steam frying, just kind of teaching you a lesson there, and you do have a handout related to that as well, so you can take that home with you and practice. And then we're going to do we're going to demo 2 dressings that you do not have recipes for, but I will give those to you on the whiteboard here. But they're just a couple that I found online. So I actually have never tried these either, so we're going to give them a whirl. One of them uses tofu for the creamy onion dressing, and then the other one is kind of like a balsamic vinegar dressing that you can make at home with a Dijon mustard base, which is, if you don't have Dijon mustard in your fridge at home, I highly recommend it as a product that's really helpful for different salad dressings, things like that when we get into the no oil. We'll close with setting goals for this week. So remember, it's an accumulation of goals. All right. So this goal is continuing your whole unprocessed foods and your Plant Strong nutrient dense goals, and then adding one related to healthy fats as well. Okay, or another one kind of related therein. Any questions you may have? Obviously, it's a very informal setting. So as you have questions, especially if it's related to what we're talking about, feel free to just kind of pop your hand up and ask away. And then we'll just have a little bit of a closing session there. Okay? So that being said, how are we doing? Anybody want to share how they're feeling as they enter week 3? Any significant changes? Recipes? Yes, great.
I'm really glad that I've come to these classes, especially that handout for all the bulk food items. We bought a whole bunch of dried beans, so we've been having like beans and rice and just a huge salad, and we can't believe that that's all we need to get everything. So
cool.
It's been really good.
Awesome. And how do you feel? Do you feel different at all from changing the way that you've been eating?
A little bit, yeah. I've started to notice that I can kind of ask myself more, like, what do I feel like eating? And I'll kind of be like, all right, I think I need more salad.
Okay.
Or I need more, grains or something like that.
Good. So you're becoming a more cognizant eater. Yeah, more mindful eater is what we kind of talk about. That's great. That's definitely one of the things you want to check in with your body, which is great. Is anybody here on Saturday for the weekend breakfast club? No? Nobody did that? I told you I wasn't coming and you guys just thought it was like not worth it? Come on, I had some great discussion questions going there. Alright. Alright, so everybody's being really shy today, which is okay, but think about it to yourselves. How are you feeling? Think about that evaluation form that we had at the back of our orientation packets. Think about your mood, your energy levels. I've had a few people find me in the store and mention that they feel like they just have an unbelievable amount of energy. They don't feel like they need caffeine as much in the morning. So that is definitely one of those first significant kind of effects that you'll start taking notice of. Okay? All right. So we have our healthy fats pillar today, and I think it's important to really talk about the different types of fats, and especially because we have the Mediterranean diet is so popular. And so when we hear about the Mediterranean diet, what do we think of? Olive oil, right? And so immediately when you get into the Health Starts Here 4 pillars and you learn about the healthy fats, what are we saying? No olive oil, right? So it becomes this kind of strange dichotomy. So a few things to note there. We're really, with the healthy fats, we're focusing on getting your fats from whole unprocessed foods, right? So that should start sounding a little bit familiar, like our other pillar, right? We also want them to be more nutrient dense, okay? So when we look at just olive oil, it is 100% fat, okay? However, when we, my handwriting has gone here. When we look at other sources of fats, from those whole unprocessed food sources. Who can name some?
Avocado.
Avocado, great. What else?
Olives.
That's
Olives, nuts. What else? Seeds, yes. What else do we have? Anybody? We had a loss. Another one that I add up here is tofu or soy products, like edamame. Most beans tend to be very low in fat and high in fiber. Tofu is a good blend of protein and fat, though, okay? A very healthy fat because it's coming from a whole food source. So if you ever get the edamame bean pods, it's a wonderful snack because it's got all those essential fats, lots of fiber, good protein in there as well as being nutrient dense. So it really hits all four of those pillars, which is great. You know, this is really kind of what we're really looking at here, the whole olive. Once you get into this olive oil, it's 100% fat. If you look at these other items here, they also have protein, they also have fiber, they also have, you know, a whole host of other vitamins, minerals, antioxidants that we're looking for that nutrient-dense pillar, right? So yes, olive oil on the Mediterranean diet is definitely touted. And we're going to be talking about the different types of fats and what type are present in the olive oil that really makes it so. However, when we're talking about the Health Starts Here, healthy fats pillar, we're really looking and aiming to get them from the plant-based sources, from those whole food sources, okay? And lots of different ways to go around this. Actually, the Meals for Four handout for this week, you have a creamy avocado dressing. I believe it's the Friday salad or Thursday or something at the end of the week. But avocados make for a terrific dressing, okay, there as well. Think about like an olive tapenade with those whole olives there, or adding them just straight onto a salad or into a pasta dish. Same exact thing, okay? The nuts and seeds. Nuts could be just whole unprocessed nuts like peanuts, walnuts, almonds, pecans, macadamia nuts, etc. But also think about peanut butter and almond butter as very healthy fat sources as well. You can turn peanut butter into a dressing or, you know, a sauce, very healthy sauce for noodles, like a peanut sauce, like an Asian-inspired kind of pad thai peanut sauce. Yes?
You know, this whole issue of olives I find a little puzzling because all olives are brine and have a lot of salt. And my initial reaction would be, well, because of that, you wouldn't want to use olives.
Yep, it's definitely not something you want to use in exorbitant amounts, but you can find olives packed in water that are going to have a little bit less salt. You can also rinse them. You're still going to get the essential oils in them as well, okay? You're going to find probably more now olives that are packed in water may not have as much salt content to them as well. So,
what about the olive bar here?
The olive bar here, they aren't, I mean, they're packed in oils. Some of them are packed with, you know, garlic and red chili pepper. You got to read the ingredients on those. So, you know, even the ones you find in the can would be ones that I would even drain just like canned beans and add those onto a salad, something like that as a healthy source. So, or a pasta dish. You know, seeds can be sunflower seeds. They can be sesame seeds. We added sesame seeds, if you were here for our cooking with grains and greens, to our salad, as well as to another stir fry? The bok choy, thank you. Yes, for our greens. But also think about things like tahini. Tahini is ground sesame seeds. It's actually a component of hummus as well. You can find tahini in our bulk department as well, if you want to just try a little bit of it. By itself, it's kind of an acquired taste, so that's why a lot of times it'll kind of go into either a dressing that you might make, Health Starts Here dressing, you'll see that a lot, as well as in the hummus, okay? But I do know some people that really like the taste of tahini and might even spread that on their toast in the morning, something like that, okay? A really easy one to make different dressings with. The tofu we're going to be experimenting with salad dressings as well. Questions on this? Yeah.
So would like soy yogurt or things like that, would they also be in the healthy fats?
Yeah, As long as it doesn't have the cow's milk dairy in it, yes.
No,
so,
it doesn't.
Yeah.
Soy milk.
So the soy yogurt, and there's now even almond yogurt, almond milk yogurt that you can find. I think that's a personal taste preference. I don't find it quite agreeable with myself, but again, touch and go. Yeah, if you like the soy yogurt, I think that would be a fine alternative as well. Yeah.
But I saw there was even almond cheeses.
There are almond cheeses, yes.
Really?
Unfortunately, they don't melt, so that's
Oh,
the only problem.
I think they were fine.
They do? Okay.
Yeah.
I've had that be
I thought they're really good.
a big complaint on that.
Okay.
Which brand do you buy?
I don't know, whatever you have here.
Okay. All right, yeah, so it might be
I liked
one with
it.
experimentation.
I thought it worked fine.
Great.
Maybe
Yeah.
it doesn't melt quite as much, but it
The
works
only
fine.
thing with like the almond cheeses is again that's going to be another processed food.
Oh,
So
that's what I was
moving
wondering.
away from
Okay.
our whole unprocessed
Okay,
filler
that's, I
there.
wondered.
But you know, in terms of comparing that to you know a whole cheese, you know that
Well,
might
you
be,
just sprinkle it on.
yeah exactly a little flavor enhancer, which is good.
Are you sometime going to cover then how to purchase things without oil? Because that was one of my missions. I gave up margarine, but then I even bought like the driest little saltine organic cracker, and then I looked later and it had sunflower. Now I purposely didn't want canola, but I mean it still had the sunflower, and
Right.
you find the palm oil, which I heard is not good for you. So then
Right.
help me out. Then how do I purchase stuff? And then we were talking about snacks. Then how do you cook like a cookie?
Right. And we are going to go over kind of the stir frying, steam frying as a no oil cooking method, but with baking, you can use things like applesauce and mashed bananas. And in our breakfast and lunches class, we're going to be making some muffins with this kind of stuff as well. Pumpkin puree works really well as well.
Flax.
Yeah, you can definitely use flax meal. I think but you also have to add water to that, which is a good one as well. So it'll change the profile a little bit, but really what fat does in baking is it's an emulsifier. And so it creates that mouthfeel. It blends all of the different ingredients together to do that. So when you add something like an applesauce or mashed bananas or a fruit puree of some sort, it'll have that same effect. It'll blend all of those ingredients there as well. Okay, instead of using a margarine or a butter, something like that. Okay.
And I was reading too about coconut oil.
Mm-hmm.
Is that better, or is what I was reading was better? It was like
Coconut oil is a big trend for 2012.
Oh, it
so you're
is?
going to be
Okay.
hearing a lot about coconut. So we had coconut water, and that has a huge surge right now as well. Coconut oil, as well as coconut milk, just everything coconut is like
why?
skidding the charts. Well, a big push just from the food industry. But when they look at the food science properties of the coconut, they tend to have a smaller chain of fatty acids. And so in their current studies, they're finding that those types of fats are more readily absorbed and utilized for energy instead of stored for energy. Okay? So instead of storing them in our fat cells, we're using and mobilizing that fat and using it for energy. However, even though the coconut is plant-based, the fat most prominently present in the coconut is saturated fat, which is an excellent transition into what we're going to be talking about here today. So, let's see if I turn it that way. It's just easier with my left hand. All right, so we've got different types of fats here. So we've got saturated fats, we have trans fats, we have mono unsaturated, and polyunsaturated. These are different types of fatty acids, okay? But the other thing you have down here, which we also hear a lot about, is cholesterol, okay? Cholesterol is another type of fat. Whoops, excuse me. All right, so when we hear about things like saturated and trans fats, are those the good or the bad fats? Those are bad. Does anybody know why?
hard?
What's that?
Do they get hard?
They get hard. Yeah, these are more likely solid at room temperature. So that's how you can identify saturated fats. Okay, so these guys are solid.
Are they,
But in the body, go ahead.
are they oxidized?
Yes. Well, when we talk about oxidation, we're talking about LDL cholesterol, which is the bad cholesterol. We'll talk about that in a second. That's excellent. But really what the saturated fats do is they are actually the ones that are going to most likely cause that inflammatory response and start blocking the arteries, okay? So they start building that atherosclerotic plaque that we hear a lot about for things like heart disease, okay? So that's kind of why they're no good there. Where do we find saturated fats? Animal products. Most largely it's animal products, okay? So animal meats, poultry, fish, dairy is a big one for saturated fats. Even if you're drinking skim milk, there is still a large percentage of saturated fat in there, okay? Other things like butter is a big saturated fat. Again, it's solid at room temperature. So wherever you find butter, you're going to find a lot of saturated fats. And a lot of our processed goods, we have saturated fat. Equally so, trans fat, okay, is a big one we're hearing a lot about. And trans fats are bad because they are actually an unsaturated fat, which typically unsaturated fats are very healthy for us. However, the chemical structure of trans fats makes it look like a saturated fat. So it acts the same as saturated fat when it gets into our body. Okay? So the trans fat, what it actually does is when we talk about cholesterol, the two different types, it'll actually raise the bad cholesterol and lower the good cholesterol. Okay? So this has bad news written all over it. And most notably, where you find a trans fat, it's not always as naturally occurring as we're going to find it in our processed foods. So that's why on the front of every package you see now it says 0 grams trans fat. Now if we remember our nutrition facts label reading, right, can we believe everything that's on the front of the package? No. Absolutely not. They can say 0 grams trans fat if there is less than half a gram per serving in that product, okay? So if there is 0.49 grams of trans fat per serving, they can say 0 grams trans fat. What's a serving, a typical serving of potato chips? 9 chips or 1 ounce, right? Very small amount. I don't know anybody that counts out 9 chips if that's what they're choosing to indulge in, okay? So, say that's a product that has the 0.4 grams per serving, right? So then, if you have instead of 1 ounce, you have 2 ounces of chips. Is it still 0 grams trans fat? No. It may be, but you have to double check the ingredients. And what are we looking for in the ingredients? Who knows? Yes, you're looking for that word hydrogenated. It may also say partially hydrogenated, okay? The hydrogenation is what makes the unsaturated fat act like the saturated fat, okay? It's a lot of like biochemistry and stuff going on there to do that in our bodies, but that's what those words mean. So if you read the ingredients label, okay, and it says partially hydrogenated soybean oil, okay, that is a trans fat. Even if it says 0 grams on the front, you have to double check, especially if it's a processed food, okay, checking for that trans fat. Also, things that you might not notice that don't have maybe a nutrition facts label and ingredients would be things like deep fried foods. Trans fats are in French fries, they're in fried chicken, they're in pastries, cookies, muffins, a lot of commercially processed baked goods, okay? So that's where you, again, have to go back to your roots on the 4 pillars, okay? Because that's where those are going to be found, and they hide in a lot of these products. So you've got to be very savvy about that, okay? All right, now when we get into things like the better fats, we're talking about monounsaturated and polyunsaturated, or MUFAs and PUFAs. You might hear those. called as well, just as a short name, okay? The unsaturated fats are heart healthy. They tend to be very anti-inflammatory, okay? Heart disease, as well as other diseases that we see around the body, are an inflammatory process, okay? So if you think about the buildup of plaque in the artery, that's an inflammation, an inflammatory process caused by these two fats here. Unsaturated fats, as talked about a lot on the Mediterranean diet, are healthy because they're anti-inflammatory, okay? Monounsaturated fats are most notably found in things like olives and avocados, almonds, things like that, okay? Polyunsaturated fats are essential fatty acids. You might have heard of them when we talk about things like omega-3 fatty acids or omega-6 fatty acids. Those are polyunsaturated fatty acids, okay? Those are coming from things like walnuts, salmon, flaxseed, things like that, okay? Walnuts, on a per serving basis, have almost 3 times the amount of omega-3 antioxidant capacity versus any other nut, any other almond, pecan, whatever it is. So walnuts are a very good source of those unsaturated fats, very anti-inflammatory, okay? Any questions on the difference between unsaturated, saturated, or trans, or the effects on the body? Okay, yeah?
So salmon will have both polyunsaturated as well as saturated fats?
Yes,
So
correct.
Kind of be concerned or worried about
Yeah,
balance.
so it's just like any of our animal meats, right? So on our Health Starts Here program, we're really trying to downsize from the American diet. You know, another good way to think about that is the ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acids that we have. It's a very fine line that we want to have, you know, basically you're looking at, just to erase this, guys, of an omega-6 to omega-3. These are our polyunsaturated fats, okay? You are looking for an ideal ratio of 3 to 1. The typical American diet today is 25 to 1. Omega-6 to omega-3, okay? So an omega-6 is found in higher doses in a lot of our animal products as well, okay? So even though it's an essential fatty acid, absolutely, this isn't always a bad guy, but it is it causes an inflammatory process, excuse me. Omega-3s are anti-inflammatory, okay? Or a blood clotting effect here, okay? Which is good. You want your blood to clot. When you get a cut or a scratch and it forms that scab or that scar, that's a lot of omega-6 with those positive blood clotting effects. For example, Eskimos have a high intake of fish, right, in their diets. So they run very high on omega-3s and not necessarily as high in omega-6s because they don't get a lot of the other foods there as well. They have a very high dose of the anti-inflammatory, anticoagulation effects of that. So they run the risk of more hemorrhagic strokes, things like that, bleeding, excessive bleeding, okay? So you want a proper balance of these guys as well, okay? So when we're talking about that, again, it's downsizing from the typical 6 to 8 ounce servings of, you know, animal products down to those 2 to 3 ounces. Still a lot of essential nutrients in there as well that you can get from plants, but, you know, we're omnivores as well, so that's, you know, kind of just downsizing the serving to make sure that you're not disrupting that balance. Focusing more on the antioxidants, the presence of those antioxidants in the plant-based foods. So cholesterol. Cholesterol, we hear a lot about, and if you got your biometric screen, right, this is something that you see on your lipid panel, right? So they have total cholesterol, and they have something called LDL cholesterol, and they have HDL cholesterol. These are the big ones. We think about this one as your lousy cholesterol. We don't like it. H is for happy. We do like it, okay? So this is your good cholesterol, bad cholesterol here, okay? The LDL cholesterol is exactly what, I'm sorry, your name one more time?
Mine?
Yeah.
Oh, Jordan.
Jordan. What Jordan was talking about with the oxidation, okay? when we oxidize LDL in our bloodstream, what it does, okay, you've got these little LDL particles, say they're these guys. What they do is they start implanting into our blood vessel wall, okay? And that'll start kind of causing the buildup here, okay? That oxidation process makes it very sticky, all right? So cholesterol is a very waxy, sticky substance in our bloodstream. So that's where it can cause these clots, okay? HDL is good because HDL, give that one an open circle, HDL comes through and actually picks up the LDL and takes it back to the liver. So it removes it from the bloodstream. So you want the HDL. So you want your HDL to be high, and you want your LDL to be low, which is kind of a cool way to look at it, right? Low LDL, high HDL. So what can you do? LDL is typically raised by an excess intake of saturated and trans fats, just as we were talking about before, okay? HDL is affected by a low-fat, plant-based diet. Dietary fiber helps lower cholesterol as well. So that's where this whole unprocessed foods, plant-based, kind of nutritious effect really comes into play. Anytime you're getting excess fiber from whole grains, dried fruit, beans, nuts, seeds, vegetables, fruits, etc., okay, that's really what we're looking for there. Exercise has a positive effect for HDL, okay? So taking advantage of your Miramont pass is an excellent way to kind of improve that and see that effect over time as well. A moderate intake of alcohol really helps. Quitting smoking really helps with your HDL as well, okay? In terms of just like that inflammatory process there is what we're looking for, okay? So that's cholesterol. It's a very sticky substance. We actually don't need to take in cholesterol through our diet. We make it ourselves in our bodies. If we do take it in, cholesterol is only found in animal foods. Okay? Same thing with plants can still have saturated fat, just like coconuts are really high in saturated fat, but you only find cholesterol in animal foods, animal-based foods. Okay? Otherwise, internally, we have processes that make them because cholesterol is an essential component of all of our cells in our body. Okay? We must have cholesterol, so our body makes it when we need it. But meat, poultry, fish, butter, dairy, anything made with any of those products is going to have cholesterol. Okay? So if you want to positively affect that and lower your cholesterol, one of the first things you can do through your diet is not eat those foods that are contributing that through diet and just let your body kind of get up to speed to producing its own. Yes?
Where do eggs sit in this kind of scheme of things?
So eggs come from animals, yeah.
Yeah. So is that considered a high cholesterol? I mean, like with still all the high unsaturated fats
yes.
Or trans fats too? Or?
Trans fats isn't as much of a concern because it's still going to be a whole product. But definitely the cholesterol is a big one with the eggs. Also just farming practices with eggs. So if you're working on removing eggs from your diet, I always say to transition at first to the healthiest egg you can probably find, which is the pasture-raised. So you want it to say pasture-raised on there. Cage-free really doesn't mean anything anymore. Fed a vegetarian diet doesn't mean anything anymore. Those are all just buzzwords to get you to buy those eggs. But it doesn't mean that the chicken's been raised as a chicken should and led a happy life. When they are, that means it's a happy chicken, which means nutritionally it's very balanced, more nutrient dense, so you're going to get a more nutrient dense egg. I believe Howard was one that was even saying if you buy the pasture raised eggs and then put it next to a commercial egg on your skillet fry pan and try them side by side, the difference is very notable there. In the taste, the color of the yolk, the texture, the firmness of the white as well, how it doesn't bleed or run all the way across the pan, excuse me. That's like the essential protein content in there as well. The cholesterol is really found in the yolk of the egg there. So that's why when people go on a hard, healthy diet as prescribed by a doctor or a dietitian, a lot of times they make this transition to egg whites, okay? It's where egg beaters came around. Because essentially that's removing the cholesterol. And there's still a lot of protein in there, right? But it's the same thing with cow's milk, dairy, etc. Some of those proteins can still cause an inflammatory response. Not to mention the fact that even in the yolk, you still have some essential nutrients. You know, you've got things like choline, which is really important, especially during pregnancy, vitamin A, vitamin E, our fat-soluble vitamins are locked in with the fat. Okay? Yeah.
And are these both the bad and the good cholesterol that you're going to find in these products?
Definitely, yes. Yeah, but in a lot of the animal-based foods too, you're going to find, you know, the saturated fats too, in higher amounts than the unsaturated. Unsaturated is usually in the plant-based foods that you're really looking at. So really wanting to adjust that ratio there as well. So typically, you know, egg consumption is one you want to start weaning down as well. So we're not having it, you know, every day, things like that. Yes, Howard.
Going back to cholesterol, HDL and LDL, is there a healthy ratio, like you mentioned with the omegas?
It's not necessarily a ratio, but you are looking, you know, when they test, you know, your blood lipid panel, you want your HDL to be as high as possible. So that's typically above, you know, above 60 is excellent. Your LDL, you want to be below 100. So, okay.
What are the LDL and HDL stand for again?
Well, it's low density lipoprotein or high density lipoprotein. But so L is for lousy. You want to keep that low. H is for happy. So I just kind of put it in that dichotomy. But they're essentially just components of the cholesterol in there. Yeah. Great. So don't think that all fats are bad, though, right? We still have, you know, the unsaturated fats that we're getting from that. We have a lot of different essential functions that we need from fat. So when we're talking about, for example, the egg yolk, right, that has a lot of essential nutrients in there, you're going to find the fat-soluble vitamins digested best and absorbed best with a fat source. Okay? So our fat-soluble vitamins are vitamins A, vitamins D, vitamin E, and vitamin K. We just have 4. The rest of them are essentially all of the B vitamins and C. These are water soluble. Okay? These are fat soluble. So fat is essential not only for storing these guys, but for absorbing them as well. Okay? To use them in a lot of our metabolic processes. Not to mention the fact that vitamin A and vitamin E are actually antioxidants as well. So they work very similarly in that function in the body, okay, to antioxidants. So they're a vitamin and an antioxidant, which means they're clearing the blood, remember, of those free radicals, those very unstable molecules that can cause cell mutations, DNA degradation, that leads us to chronic disease, okay? D is very important. We hear a lot about vitamin D now, important for chronic disease prevention as well, okay? K, same thing, all right? So we need these guys. So it's an essential function of fat to do that. Not to mention insulation, all right? So we all need kind of a fat protective coat, especially in the winter, right? That's a function of fat. But it's also protection. It's insulating our organs and protecting them. Do you know that every organ in your body, in your gut here, has a layer of fat surrounding it, okay? And that's for just protection. If you get punched in the stomach, if you fall down, it's creating a barrier to kind of cushion those organs so it doesn't cause any harm, any damage there. The problem is because you do have a fat layer around each of your organs, you can also get something called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which means you have so much storage of fat. A lot of times we just think of fat of, like, the fat is what you can pinch, right? But you forget that you actually have visceral fat, and that's the fat around your organs. So it's not just subcutaneous underneath your skin when you gain weight, you're also gaining a fat layer around your liver, around your stomach, around your intestines, all of those things. And that can disrupt metabolism over time as well. So we want to be cautious about that, okay? What else did I want to talk about here? What other questions do we have here?
Question, saturated fats.
Yep.
Animal sources for saturated fat and plant sources for saturated fat. Are they both bad, saturated fats, equally bad? Or?
So, I mean, it's kind of the coconut versus, you know, the bison. You know what I mean? So, coconut is a plant-based source, but largely the fats, and you can see that when you look at even just a coconut milk nutrition facts label, is largely the fat is all saturated there. Same thing with the oil, coconut oil. So it's really focusing on small amounts. And that goes for a lot of other things too. Just because it's good for you doesn't mean you need to consume an exorbitant amount, right? We get so caught up in this. The new study that hits, you know, the New York Times or, you know, the front page of the magazine or newspaper that says coconut oil is going to be your new best friend. And then what do? We're like, oh, we're going to get the greatest amount of coconut oil, and you start cooking with it. Well, we stopped using coconut oil when another newspaper article hit the stands and said that we were using coconut oil to pop popcorn at the movie theater, which was causing us to greatly intake our amount of saturated fat. In one bucket of popcorn popped in coconut oil, there was as much saturated fat as up to like 10 different sirloin steaks. Okay? And they did that. They had this huge press conference from the Center for Science and the Public Interest, and they did that because it kind of helped people realize, even though it was coconut oil. Okay? So it's still kind of that dichotomy there as well. Which brings us to the fact too, is that again, to get just the oil from the coconut, there has to be some sort of processing that goes into that. Just like getting just the oil from the olive is a process as well. I really wanted to show a video today. I couldn't find a really good one, but I was kind of YouTubing a little bit today just to have some fun, which I encourage you to do, and look at how oil is made, right, and the different processes. So really taking that whole harvest olive, they have to wash it, they have to get rid of all the excess leaves, they pulp it into a mash, and then they put it in between these like pancake-looking layers, and then they press it. And that's that cold pressing that happens there, okay? If you get full olive oil, which is a much more refined product, it's more clear, transparent when you look through it, that has a lot of that, the opaque, the cloudiness, the natural cloudiness that comes in the oil extracted and filtered out, okay? And that's really what we're trying to avoid. But again, think about what's left behind. The fiber, what's trapped in all those other cells that you're not extracting from the oil. And when you're adding it, you're still adding just the fat. Okay, so we want to create it as a whole component altogether. Yes, okay.
My blood report showed that I needed to monitor closely the amount of fish oil that I took, that I obviously was getting too much of it.
Oh yeah? What was it, because of a certain reading on the lipid panel?
I don't know if it was lipid, it was about alleles.
Okay.
And it showed the percentages of people in each category.
Okay.
This isn't one of the highest percentages.
So, because you were doing a fish oil supplement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So fish oil supplements have been super popular because that's a great way to intake
fat in my
omega-3s.
blood now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you still have to understand it's an oil, right, that you're putting into your body. So even if it has beneficial effects in the studies, right, think about where you're also getting that through your diet. So if you feel like you have a high intake of, you know, walnuts, avocados, olives, you know, all of those things as well, maybe small amounts of salmon over time, you probably don't need to supplement quite as much. Don't fall into that. But that's how they get you, right, because they want you to spend more money on their dietary supplements than on the whole unprocessed foods. So it's creating that shift there. Don't fall into the every, you know, a pill for every ill kind of American lifestyle, okay? You don't want to just, it's not like Willy Wonka where you can take a pill and you go through all 3 stages of a meal, you know, from appetizer to the main course to dessert, and then you're done. You have everything you need, right? we want to be eating real food and take enjoyment in that. And so that's what part of the 28-day challenge is really doing. It's hooking you back on to real enjoyable food, okay, that you can really idealize, which is great.
I have a question about the coconut water. Does it still has the same like fat thing?
The coconut water still has a little bit of like the coconut cream in it, but essentially it doesn't really have any of the fat. It's just the liquid, just the juice. They haven't ground any of the pulp in it. You can get some with the pulp in it, so we'll have some higher fat. This is just water, which is another great transition because let's start our first demo here. Whoop, yep, me too.
Laura, what did you say vitamin K was good for?
Vitamin K, I didn't say, but vitamin K is think of K for coagulation vitamin, so it helps with blood clotting a lot of the time. So if people are on like a blood thinner, something like that, a lot of times they have to monitor their vitamin K intake. So yeah, great question. All right, so I've got my pan here. Hopefully we can see that in the mirror. And the first rule with no oil cooking, so if anybody's seen me do this before, I've typically used vegetable broth. I thought I'd change it up a little bit today, and actually I'm going to be using coconut water. You can use apple juice. You can use just water. You can use this Bragg's Aminos. You can use mushroom broth. You can use one of our no oil Health Start Tier dressings, which I pulled one of all 6 off of the shelf today, just so you can take a look. We've got lots of different ones there. We've used the carrot and ginger one before. There's 3 different balsamics there, a tomato basil, and also tangerine dressing, okay, which I've used as like an Italian alternative. So it's a great way if you are just in a bind and you need a salad dressing to use that. But I've also used those as marinades, just as you would use a typical Italian dressing, but without the oil, okay? And then we're gonna make 2 more here as well. So the idea with sauteing onions is you gotta get the pan really, really hot.
Are these dressings with all the other dressings, or?
They are in the produce department immediately to the right of the boxed packaged greens. Yes, and they're right in a row. You'll see them, and you'll see the band that says Health Starts Here.
So they're cold?
They are cold, yes. I'm going to keep those refrigerated.
And what are the Bragg's liquid aminos?
Bragg's liquid aminos, it's actually a type of, where am I yet? It's a fermented soy kind of product there. It's tastes a little bit salty. It's like a soy sauce alternative. People use them in salad dressings, Asian cooking, a lot of different stuff. So we're going to use a little bit in this. I'm going to saute these red onions in the coconut water, and actually going to steam fry down a little bit of spinach too, just to see how you can create that kind of easy saute. And then you season, right? Again, even if we're using oil to cook, we're using it because we think that it's all going to stick on the bottom, right? And ultimately, oh darn it, what you're going to find is it really won't do that. Cheat a little bit. Okay. All right, so this is warming up here. All right, so you hear that sizzle when you add the onions? That's what you're looking for. You want that pan to be really, really hot when you add those in. And ultimately, if you're having on high heat, and then you want to keep kind of mixing it around to prevent the sticking. Ultimately, you never want to use metal on metal, but I don't have my keys for some reason, so I apologize about that. And it's just going to keep kind of sauteing down. You can multitask while you're doing this as well, but ultimately it's not going to stick, and if it does, you use a little bit of liquid to basically get up all those sugars. Because the browning is actually the evaporation of the natural water content of the onions, as well as the solidification of the natural sugars found in there as well. So that's where caramelized onions taste really good, right? Because you're basically extracting all of those natural sugars out of there to kind of cook them down a little bit. So you can start seeing that a little bit there as well. And then the onions start to weep a little bit. They start kind of carrying out those essential kind of properties. of it. And that's the steam fry. And that helps get all those brown parts up, as well as adding some flavor, which is great. The pan is still really, really hot. While that's kind of still cooking down, I'm going to start on our first dressing, and this is the creamy one, okay? So this is actually 12 ounces of tofu, but I'm only going to use half of it because the recipe just calls for 6 ounces. I'll write it up here in a second. I'm just going to drain it a little bit here. You can find these in our ethnic aisle. This one is a really soft tofu, so it's really good to add to smoothies, to make dressings out of. There's also firm tofu, which I typically cook more often with. So I'm just going to eyeball this, but kind of pull about half of it out there. And a whisk or a fork work really well with these. And browning this. All right, does anybody have good board handwriting? Wants to help me out? No? Anybody? Pretty scared? All right. Thank you. All right. It's this recipe right here, the 6 ounces, and then we've got 1 tablespoon of minced onion, which you have here.
You want me to write this in there?
Yes, please. Just that creamy dressing one.
Can we find it online?
I'm sure if you kind of Googled it, yeah, you could. I'll try to add the links to it online as well. It's very simple though, as you'll kind of see there. 2 teaspoons of lemon juice, right?
Yes.
All right, and then 2 teaspoons of lemon juice going in here. And it calls for a little bit of dill, but I thought I'd actually kind of make my own rendition because I didn't have any dill. So I'm going to add a little bit of chili powder on there. So if you want to have a little spice to it. And a little bit of turmeric. Turmeric and cinnamon are 2 very potent spices that are really important for heart health. Things like that. Blood pressure, etc. All right, got brown going. I'm just going to add a little bit more of that. And then while the water's still in there, I'm actually going to add a little bit of spinach. And what you're going to find actually on the handout I gave you, the No Cooking Without Oil handout, is they actually use the sauteed onions as a base for a casserole dish. So instead of spraying with like the no stick spray that you see a lot of, and I've used this before too in like lasagna or just basic casseroles. It's a really easy method just to prepare it without a non-stick spray, which is great. Because if you look at, even though it says no calories, right? It's like the 0 grams trans fat thing. If you look at this a serving size of the PAM no stick spray, it says like 0.3 of a second is a serving size of a spray. Okay, so if you can spray that in like, you know, a third of a second, be my guest, but I don't know anybody that does it. Instead we go shh, right over the pan. Well, that's no longer, you know, 0 calories or 0 fat, so it makes a big difference. All right, so I'm just going to sprinkle some of the Bragg's for a little bit of flavor. And just like all recipe demos, you will get to try it, which will be great. Hopefully you like onions, because I have a lot in there. And then a little bit of red pepper just for a little kick. You could leave that out if you don't like it, but. These are red onions, yeah. Could be any type of onion. Doesn't matter there.
What were the other spices you added to the dressing?
To the dressing, so we had minced onion, and then the lemon juice, and I added a little bit of chili powder and turmeric. But again, you can season these, you know, however you want there. It actually calls for fresh dill on there, so if you even had dried dill, you could try it, but fresh ingredients are just so superior to a lot of those things. So it's typically kind of what I recommend there. So So how quick was that? This is like pretty much done. But think about all the other ingredients you could have added to this. If you add frozen vegetables, the water content in those kind of helps deglaze the pan as well as trying to cook them, which is great. So I'm just going to take this off the heat a little bit here. Let that sit. So with this guy, you can use it in a food processor, or you can just kind of mix it down yourself, kind of however you want to utilize it. Ideally, I have these drawers open and have a whisk to do that too. And if you want it to be a little creamier, they always say you can add a little bit more of the lemon juice. I also brought some Cholula out. Think about other salad dressings that are easy to prepare that you can do without oil. Hot sauce is one. Salsa, fresh salsa is another one. Just plain avocado is great. Just great as well. All right, so this is starting to cream up very nicely.
Did you want me to add the curry dressing?
Yes, that would be great. All right, so then the next dressing we've got is curry dressing. Which actually, let's draw that up there first. So everybody will just kind of get a small sample of these guys. But again, remember this tofu can be a base, a cream base for anything, okay? So you could make it a spicy one. You could make it a citrus dressing. You could make it a little bit more savory, even add a little bit of Bragg's in there if you wanted. Get that salty kind of flavor. So I'm gonna try this. Make sure it's not poisonous for you guys. Don't want to give out a bad product. Okay, definitely citrusy. I'm gonna add a little bit of black pepper just to give it a little bit of afterbite there too. And maybe just a pinch of salt. So that was literally less than a dash there. But this is a small little dressing. With creamy dressings, I highly recommend starting with a very small amount and massaging it in with your hands. That will basically get the dressing over all of the leaves more significantly than if you use two yeah, the mixing, guys, tongs. There you go. There it is. It's Monday. All right. So we have this guy here, and then we have our curry dressing, which we have our balsamic. So again, with a lot of these with the Dijon, I'll even just start with the Dijon as the base. Okay. I'm probably going to double this guy here. So what do we have for Dijon? 2 teaspoons. All right, you can't go wrong because you're just adding all these ingredients, right? To taste, thank you very much. This is how a lot of times I'll do my own balsamic at home too. I'm just doubling it here, guys, too, if you're wondering where I'm going wrong. What else do we have? A little rice vinegar.
Could you leave out the rice vinegar and double the balsamic?
If you wanted to, absolutely. You definitely could do that. Got my honey here. Actually, this is the honey from our bulk department, which is delightful. I'm actually going to use a little bit less than they call for because what I read about online was that it was a little bit too sweet with all the honey. So we'll give just about half.
Could you use agave nectar too?
You know, on the health starts here, we actually don't idealize agave just because it's another processed kind of sugar. Honey is more in its raw form, I guess you would say, whereas the agave had to go from the plant, just like the oil, to get to that nectar. It undergoes like a lot of processing in that.
Is there something else you can recommend that's not animal-based then? Something besides honey?
Yeah, you could do like a date paste kind of on there, which I would recommend.
Maple syrup?
Maple syrup would be another sweetener. It's still not as unprocessed as honey. There actually used to be no sweeteners at all on Health Starts Here, and then they just recently added the honey. I'm trying to double it up here. Okay. All right. What else do we got? Dijon, and then we have the salt and pepper. So I'm just gonna lightly do the salt because I don't think it probably needs too much with that extra curry powder. What do you guys think? You scared? Excited? Nervous? All right. So the Dijon mustard adds that kind of creaminess as well as a little bit more of that vinegar taste we're looking for. All right, and then while we're doing this, since we have, I'm going to serve some of this stuff up. While I am doing so, I would love it if you guys would use your Post-its in front of you. And on the top, I want you to think about your goal for this week. Even if it's just an idea right now that you're going to finalize tonight or tomorrow, what are you going to be working on this week related to that? And then on the bottom side of the Post-it, I want you to tell me one thing you're taking away from our kind of talk lesson today, okay? So it could be anything you learned that you didn't know before, something exciting, one of these new dressings, whatever it may be, okay? And then you'll post it just like the last time on the wall out there as you walk up. That one's good. Got some extra kick in there. All right. All right.
So I had a question. So how much fat should you eat a day? Like in avocado or olives or, I mean, how much, what's a, like a half an avocado does it a day or?
I don't typically recommend like set gram, weights because I don't think we eat in grams. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think it's a balance. So you kind of have to go just by really how you're feeling at the bottom in terms of, because fats and proteins will actually provide us with the highest amount of satiety, which means the highest amount of like that feeling of fullness, okay? And so you really want to kind of balance that out. So,
But
yeah,
probably
like
should have something every day.
something every day. Yeah, you definitely want to have a balance of fats and proteins as well as carbohydrates. But again, if you're choosing those plant-based sources, this isn't about counting calories. It's not about feeling like you're going to be deficient. If you're going with that 4-pillar kind of system, you should be getting what you need, what your body requires. But always wanting to focus on, protein, positive fat sources, as well as carbohydrates, because not all carbohydrates are good either, right? Because a cookie is a carbohydrate, cakes, all that kind of stuff, breads, like white breads, white grains. We want to be focusing on those complex carbohydrates that are things like our brown rice, our barleys, our quinoa, things like that. Does anybody have a goal that they would love to share with the group to give us some ideas?
I eat all the leftovers I've made of steel-cut oats and 5 bowls of goodness that I've made over the weekend.
Awesome. Good. Look at that. Already going with the mighty bowls of goodness. I love it. Good. Who else? What else?
Buy an air popcorn popper.
An air popcorn popper. It's a great way to cut out, yes, the oil in popcorn. Definitely. Did anybody realize that popcorn is actually a heart healthy snack. Maybe know that? It's good. Heard that somewhere? Maybe you've read it.
But not the microwave kind, huh?
No, not the microwave kind. They say heart healthy. I meant heart healthy, but I also meant whole grain snack. It's a whole grain because it's just a whole corn kernel. So especially if you buy it in like the bulk department, it's a great way to do it as well. All right, so ideally I think that this creamy dressing could have been whisked a little bit more if I had a little bit more time or used a food processor. So I would recommend that. Can anybody tell me in the, just because off the top of my head I don't know, but do you have the recipe for the tahini miso dressing in one of your pamphlets that you've gotten? So I'll post that one online this week. Okay. I'll post that one on the website this week as well, after I upload the video. Okay. Everybody good with carrots? This is how we're trying our salad dressings today.
It has nothing to do with nutrition, but how did the Senate bean soup get its name?
I'd have to ask the recipe developers at the big house in Austin. I have no idea.
What's that?
I bet it's what they serve every day, regardless of everything else in the Senate,
You may be right.
on Capitol Hill.
All right, and if you're ready, please pop up and grab some of these samples and kind of mill around. I've got one more dish up here. And there's little taster paddles, or you can just take them as a little shooter. Yeah, we can take shots of food, right? As long as it's healthy. Alright, if you don't like, does anybody not like spicy food? Because the curry dressing is a little spicy. I still recommend you try it, but.
Yes.
You can use the ones in the back there, and these little solo cups can go in the recycling. All right, and then we have our curry dressing up here. You ever like carrots with the curry one too, maybe? What? Yes, please. Oops, I'm kind of getting doused. This one you really can take like a shooter though, right? No?
The onions are great.
All right. So lots of variations, right? And all I did to find these ones too, and kind of experiment a little bit more with them was I typed in, no oil dressings and just kind of a recipe search. So there's going to be lots of different vegetarian or vegan sites where you're going to find those, okay? Just because it says vegan doesn't mean it's oil-free, right? Because technically, especially if you're using olive oil, that is still not coming from animals, so it'd still be considered a vegan food, okay? So we're going to be savvy about that. Any last-minute questions that you think folks at home might want to know about while I have the camera running? Otherwise, we'll sign off.
Grass-fed beef, what's the ratio of omegas in grass-fed?
Howard, you asked me all of these scientific questions I can't answer. I have no idea. I'm going to look it up for you, though, and I will get back to you. How about that? Okay. It probably depends on exactly what they're being fed as well. But yeah. The ratio I don't know, but I'll find out for you. Okay? All right, guys, that's all I have for you. So thank you for being here tonight.